so this is my new top. It's not new, it's just like this old gray top that I had. It was like €1. It was at Primark. It was kind of like a longer one, and then I cut it into a crop top, and now I dyed it green, and now I have a green top. Really excited about that. And pants turn out to be really well good as well. They're kind of like stained in some parts, but the result is phenomenal. Now I have green pants, and I didn't have to spend. I mean, there was the water involved, and there was like the dye, which was $3. So for $3 now I have two new things, and I have the rope shoe that I'm gonna use to make some necklaces. So yeah, I really like dyeing clothes. It's really fun, and it gives me like interesting options. I don't know, it's fun. But yeah, anyway, so here I'm not to talk about that. I'm here to talk about the Enneagram and misidentification with 5 and other types. So I'm going to start with 5 and 8, which is the one that is the closest to, not in terms of the two types, but the ones that I had the most compatibility with. And then I'm gonna go down, and then I'm gonna have 7, and then 4 and 6, 3, 2, 1, 9, and that's going to be the order. So misidentifying 5s and 8s, I've technically already read this when I was reading for 8s, but now that I'm reading from 5s, I have a different perspective. My head is more closer to type 5. So let's go. These two types are not often mistyped, but share similar attitudes. 8s and 5s both see themselves as outsiders, and both feel rejected easily. Both are highly independent and willing to go to battle with anyone who threatens their independence. Both believe in their direct communication, can be aggressive, and tend to protect their vulnerability. So I guess this is the parts they have in common, and they say it's not really common for you to just misidentify these two, and yet here I am. Still unsure. I think I mentioned this in the last video that I might be a little bit more inclined these days to align with 8, but like I'm reading 5 and I'm getting back to like I kind of relate to this. It's also kind of like a relatability to the past. This reads as how I used to be. So there's that. 8 sometimes see themselves as 5s because they go to 5 in stress, and therefore they form cold times when they have withdrawn from others to strategize and think about their future courses of action. Nonetheless, 8s are more often deal with problems head on and can be highly assertive in going after what they want. 5s, by contrast, tend to retreat from others and to cut out from many of their needs in order to avoid risky dependencies. I feel like when I am like unhealthy, I can relate to both of this. And once again, I don't think that these two are mutually exclusive. I think you can retreat into yourself and still like, like you're choosing yourself, yes, but like life involves interacting with people. So in those interactions, you are, more incisive, as they're mentioning here. 8s are highly instinctual, and very related to their bodies. They are people of practical action, pragmatism, sensuality as a result. 5s tend to stay in their heads more and often have an ambivalent relationship with their bodies. Staying grounded and practical can be a problem for 5s, and is almost never one for 8s. I compare James Joyce, a 5, with Ernest Hemingway, an 8. See, this is a better comparison than some of the other ones where they have like actors. I have no idea what they're like. I just know their characters that they play. But this one, I can read basically into like what they write. So there's more to this here. But yeah, so basically what I'm trying to see here is like, am I retreating into myself? Because I do that, but I also do the thing where I'm like up front. I still don't see these two things as mutually exclusive. I think that you can have kind of like a back and forth between like you and your oh, my rings. Fixed it. But I don't know, man. It's just that I don't see this kind of like differences as being different. I think that depending on the day, how you're feeling, you act one way or the other. There's not, like one definite way that you kind of like behave, But yeah, so misidentifying 5s and 8s, they're not commonly misidentified as they're saying here, but I do think that there's room for both to be the case. I look at 5s and I see a lot of like myself in the past, but also like there was like a lot of 8 in the past as well. But like right now, I think I'm more roundedly 8, so I might have to change my personality type instead of being both maybe just, 7, 8 with a wing and 7. So now 5s and 7s. These types are seldom so the ones I'm closest to, they're seldom mistyped one another, but they have some similarities. 5s and 7s are also both thinking types. They are both highly curious, exploratory, and willing to try new ways of doing things. Both types also have a propensity to collect things and to be high strung. They are quite different emotionally in their characteristic preoccupations and avoidances. So maybe this is that, like this the 5ness comes from like this 7, which would be an 8 wing in 7. 5 tend to be more socially isolated and withdrawn, spending long hours working alone, working on their projects, reading, listening to music, and so forth. 5s prefer cerebral entertainment. 7s are highly gregarious and like to stay active. See, I relate to this. Staying active. Oh my god, I did it all dirty. Oh shit. Active. They enjoy a good read too, but get impatient with sitting around for extended periods of time. This does reflect me lately, and by lately I mean the past couple of years, and honestly even more. Like I think I've always had this thing, but it has to do with my ADHD as well. So I don't know if I can fully just embrace this and be like, yeah, this is me. The gift of the 5 is intense focus and concentration. The gift of the 7 is breadth of vision and synthesis. I think I've been struggling with intense focus and concentration lately. So so maybe I should go to type 8 as being my type. The gift of the 7 is breadth of vision and synthesis. 7s are also like the optimists of the Enneagram, seeing the positive side of most things and wanting to avoid topics that get too dark, painful, or heavy. 5s are almost the opposite, seeing the optimism as unrealistic and being drawn to dark, macabre, and nihilistic side of life. Once again, this feels like maybe because I'm bipolar, like I'm having this difficulty, but like both of this they read like me at different points in time. So like I guess what I have to do is kind of like subtract where I'm like when I'm manic, where I'm like when I'm depressed, and then that's the question of like should I subtract what I'm like my ADHD? But like my ADHD is who I am, is how I process things, so I can't really separate it from like how I am, because like without that wouldn't really be me, that wouldn't be how I would be functioning. So there's that. This is side of life. Of course, 5s can resemble 7s when they are under increased stress and moving their direction of disintegration. At such times, they can become distracted and scattered like other 7s. But as soon as stressful situations relieve, they will return to their more focused, withdrawn ways. That's an interesting one, because distracted and scared is how I feel a lot of the time, and it does beget the question, like, am I like this normally, or is there something that is stressing me out? Where exactly am I? Where do I find myself in this spectrum? But then they have some examples of people to contrast, but I don't know who they are. So I am now 7. Now I'm gonna go for 4. I don't know which is closer. I think 6 or 3. They're pretty close. I'll figure it out. We said in 5, 4s, and 5s. 4s and 5s can resemble each other in that both are withdrawn types, both can be individualistic and eccentric by measuring cultural standards, and both can be highly creative. Of course, there is a greater risk of mistyping for 4s with wings in 5s and 5s with wings in 4s, and I would be a 5 for wing in 4, so makes sense. 5s are more likely to mistype as 4s than vice versa, primarily because of simplistic definitions of the types. Some 5s have learned that 4s are more feeling oriented and 5s are more intellectual, and seeing that they have deep feelings and presume that they must be 4s. This is especially true for female 5s. Interesting. Also, 5s are often portrayed as scientists or engineers, while 4s are creative artists. Interestingly enough, kind of like both me, I am majoring both in engineering, and I had to leave the course, but plastic arts. So once again, the duality, they're not mutually exclusive. You can like both things. You can have like a career in STEM and still have very artistic hobbies. I don't think I like how they're just trying to really put people on these boxes. I don't think it works for me. In fact, it's true that 4s are less likely to be scientists than most other types, but there are as many 5s who are scientists, artists as 4s, although their styles are somewhat different. 4s are self-absorbed and emotionally volatile. They express their feelings one way or another and need people to respond to them in an emotional way. Yeah, I don't relate to this specifically. Their artistic work tends to be autobiographical, autobiographical, based on their families and relationships. Interesting. I think that there is certain element of that in my work, but it's not just that. Families and relationships past are required, and on the content of their subjective experiences. Guys may have intense feelings but share them with few people. Their feelings tend to be to fuel their thoughts and their imagination, leading them to more abstract or fantastic forms of creative expression. The work is less autobiographical and more often portrays the vision of reality. Okay, I think I relate more to this actually. I was thinking about my writing specifically, and it does bear a lot from like what I see, necessarily what I experience. I was talking about this thing, like them being the compatibility of these types. It gets me wanting to write or consume something that is, ingrained into like other people's experiences. I paint what I see. 5 tend to be more experimental and outlandish in their artwork. Although both types can explore personal darkness more thoroughly than most, 4 tend to focus on their disappointments in love and their sad childhoods and their attendant pain. But yeah, though, not so much when I write about. 5 tend to focus on their emptiness and feelings of meaninglessness. 5s are more driven to penetrate the surface of things, to understand, forced to get in touch with feelings and cathartically express them. And then you have more people to compare that I don't know. Okay, and rice I know, big bleacher also. Okay, so now I think I'm gonna go for 6 and then for 3. Okay, so I was identifying 5s and 6s. 5s and 6s are both thinking types, and when educated can both be quite intellectual. It is far more common for 6s to mistype as 5s, but for some easily understood reasons. While the 2 types, 6s tend to be more linear and analytical in their thinking because they're interested in troubleshooting, prediction, and establishing methods that can be repeated. Thus, contrary to popular belief, the world of academia and higher education is more the realm of 6s than of 5s. Interesting. Academia teaches students to work with advisors and mentors to cite sources and back up arguments with quotes from authorities, to follow proper procedures and papers, and these are so forth are all type 6 values. 5s are much more non-linear in their thinking. Okay, I'm relating more to the 5 when making this comparison because I was, as I said, there are some things about 5 that I used to relate to more when I was more academically oriented. And then like right now not so much, but when you put it like that, because I have been kind of like disinclined from academia lately, so there's something here. And then they're saying that it's not really as linear as that. I see myself a little bit more. They're interested in finding out where established theories break down and developing iconoclastic ideas that shake up structures and establish methods. 5s are, generally speaking, bolder than 6s in their positions and creativity, but are also far less practical. 5s tend to feel that they can only trust their own minds to come to conclusions. They believe that everyone else is likely to be less well informed. This kind of resembles me at certain points in times, not so much anymore. I think that I've been getting increasingly less informed, purposely so. There's just too much information, and you get very overwhelmed if you're just trying to pay attention to everything. So you have to kind of like make choices basically as to what you're spending your time on, and what you're going to absorb and what you want. So I don't think I relate so much to this anymore. When I was younger and I was fighting and I was very much in the middle, like things, I guess I did feel this way sometimes, that I had more information. That people who didn't really see things the way I did, is that they didn't have it. In some cases it was true, like the point, but like with people, like they don't really care about information and facts and whatever. They want, to kind of like, they want to tend to what they already think, what they already believing, and like that. Sometimes like even if you're presenting, a different reality to them, they don't want to, accept it. They don't take it in. It's just kind of pointless in the end. 6s get frankly trying to find something to trust precisely because they do not trust their own minds to come to meaningful conclusions. Interesting. Yeah, I think I might have, risk being more of a 5 in this context. I mean, of course that, there are things that like I don't know, I don't have the knowledge of. So, I'm not out here pretending that I know more than specialists and professionals and, people who study those things. But, talking about just daily things, yeah, I think it's that I might have a little too much confidence in myself, to be completely honest. Precisely because it's not just their minds to come to meaningful conclusions. The difference between them can be seen between Umberto Eco 5 and Tom Clancy 6, the Peter Gabriel 5 and Bruce Springsteen a 6. I know all these people are, but like I don't think I've read from Umberto Eco Tom Clancy not so much. I know what he writes. Very great, but I know who it is. Bruce Springsteen. I also know who that is, but like I don't have a whole lot of knowledge on their music to kind of like come to conclusions. Music is also like a good example of like things that you can compare, you know, because I'm still caught up on the whole like why am I comparing actors? I don't know these people. I have no way of like measuring kind of like where they are. I can measure characters that they have played that I watched, but them as people, like what's up with that? So type 5, type 3. The principal reason these two very different types are confused is that some average trees, especially if they are intelligent, will like to see themselves as thinkers. Since 5s are mostly still typically seen as the intelligent thinking type, average trees may choose it rather than the type they actually are. The misidentification is made almost exclusively by trees, since 5s are not likely to think that they are trees. Average trees are set up to fulfill the hidden expectations of their parents. So in a family that values intelligence, originality, and intellectual brilliance, it's quite natural for trees to grow up thinking that they must be those things in order to be worthwhile. Thus, narrow conceptions of types or unflattering and unfair representations of the type tree in some Enneagram literature may cause some average trees to be 5s. Once again, I said, you know, I was like reading the things of tree, and it was like all very unflattering. You know, it was all very not mean, because you know they're just talking about the way somebody is. So I don't think it can necessarily be mean, but the way that they were putting things was very, you know, very outwardly kind of like, yeah, they were kind of shitting on trees. That's basically what's happening. Some trees may well be thinkers and have original ideas. They may excel academically and be brilliant students, but these traits alone are not sufficient to be a 5. Once again, the root of the misidentification lies in focusing on one or two traits rather than considering the type as a whole, including the central motivations. Oh, that is an interesting thing to consider. But like, once again, if I consider the central motivations, thinking about type 5 and type 8, I can see myself with like both of these, maybe like an 8 is heavy and edge. But it does feel like, you know, it's like something that changes on a daily basis. It's not really something super concrete, or as concrete as I would like it to be for me to have like a concrete answer. This is longer than the others. There are many significant similarities between these two types. The kind of thinking they engage in is very different. Types are very process-oriented. They do not care about final goals and can be extraordinarily involved in abstract ideas for the sake of acquiring knowledge virtually as an end in itself. The pursuit and possession of knowledge enthroned 5s, and not only do their interests need to have practical results for them to be satisfying, average 5s are just as likely never to seek fame or fortune for their discoveries and creations. 5s follow their ideas whenever they take them, with no particular end in view. Their ideas do not even be related to making discoveries. Creating their own private inner realities can be reward enough. In any case, average 5s will stay with a project for years until they exhaust their subject or themselves or both. I'm kind of like relating to this version of I more in terms of like my fantasies, because like that is exactly, if you think of it like that, is exactly what it's describing. But it is interesting because they're saying that like they don't look for like fame and fortune, which is interesting. But like with the 8, in me is very much wanting kind of like you know, like I guess like recognition and, you know, like leave a mark. So, you know, they're kind of like craving this, but probably so is like the tree, because they are kind of attention whores, it seems. Trees, by contrast, are not usually involved in the subjects for their own sake. They change their interest and career rapidly if the success and recognition they seek eludes them. Okay, interesting. Moreover, average trees pursue their intellectual work with personal goals in mind, either consciously or unconsciously, to impress others, to be famous, to be known as the best in their field, to be acclaimed as a genius, to be a rival in a discovery, to win a prestigious prize or grant, and so forth. The essential consideration is that intellectual work is frequently undertaken to achieve goals and garner recognition rather than for the love of knowledge and the excitement of intellectual discovery. In trees, self-promotion and status-seeking elements can enter the picture. Average trees tend to promote themselves and to talk about their brilliant achievements, whereas the average 5s tend to be secretive and reticent about their work or discoveries. Furthermore, the pragmatic thinking of average trees calculates how to achieve goals in the most efficient manner, something completely alien to practical curiosity-driven 5s. Interestingly enough, I'm not relating to either of these types right now. There's something like, you know, else or something in the middle, which might be, you know, the 8. But yeah, in addition, trees are highly sociable and well-groomed. They know how to present themselves favorably. 5s are usually loners and often put little to no effort into their personal appearance. okay, if you mean appearance, like literally, I'm clearly putting effort into my appearance, but like in your demeanor, the way that you present and how like what it means and what it represents, yes, usually I don't care so much about that. The appearance means less to them than pursuing their interests until their problems are solved and the work is done. Average trees are highly aware of what others think about them, whereas average fives care little about anyone else's good opinion. Yeah, relation to five in this way. It is an interesting thing how, because I'm not like the most hopeless person, like socially. I can, kind of behave myself. Of course, as I talked about before, if there's something contentious, I usually engage, and I have thoughts and opinions, and I don't really shy away from sharing them. So that's what people would think. For my dad, sometimes he thinks that I'm being a little too much, I'm a little too contentious, and that is that became bordering into like impolite territory. I don't think so. As long as the way you're presenting yourself is the things you're saying like is respectful, I think it's fine. Of course, there's a time and a place for things, but like sometimes like if you're saying something, it makes like it's like enough more. I already remarked it. There's off something remarked, but now I can't remember what the word is. But yeah, I can just let it go. I won't make a scene necessarily, but like I will let my opinion be known, but respectfully. Average trees must be considered as sexually and socially desirable and will conform to and set social standards. Fives are often strange, eccentric, and isolated from others, not at all concerned about conforming to social standards. Yes, I relate more to this, I guess. Contrast personalities of trees such as Michael Tilson Thomas, I do not know who that is, Carl Sagan, okay, I do know who that is, with those of fives such as Glenn Gould and Stanley Kubrick. Glenn Gould, I don't know who Glenn Gould is. Kubrick, I've been watching some of his movies lately. Okay, so something I kind of like I noticed about this type 5, type 3 situation is that if you feel like, in between them, there's kind of like a type 8, there's a version of that, and I think that sometimes like the version 8 version is closer to me than, like the 5 would be, because I can be very like much in my own head. I can, okay, now I'm gonna go numerically, so I'm gonna reach 1, 2, and then 9. I can be in my own head and just build my palaces there, but I feel like in the past couple of years I've been more outwardly kind of like engaging with things. I've been more be less stuck in my head. I do have my moments where that does happen. It's kind of hard to talk about these things because whenever I feel like I have like a statement to make that is somehow like universal, then I have exceptions there, to the rule. So I don't really know what exactly to go with, just which one is it? Definitely, I would say that I kind of like, I see some of like the 3 things, and it reminds me, I think, it's not that I relate to them, which is that I find the 5 to be very alien to me, so I'm not relating to that, but I'm also, not related to the 5, and as a consequence, I'm kind of, like, who am I then, if this is not me? And then, the 8 kind of like comes to mind, and I'm like, yeah, then maybe the 8 is closer. So I think that by the end of this, what might happen is that I will find that I will be an 8, no longer a 5, but because before I was a 5 with a wing in 4 and an 8 with a wing in 7. I was like both of them simultaneously, and like right now, I think I might be, like more of an 8, but the 5 is like, let's say 1% below, but that 1% is the difference between like me being closer to 5 than to me being closer to 8. So there's that. And also like it is interesting because I think that I needed a certain distance from like the 5-ness of it all, because there's some things about 5 that I have historically related to. They feel very much like me, but like right now they're not so much like me anymore, but they still hint true, and they still ring true to some extent. So there's that. Identifying 1s and 5s. 1s and 5s both correspond to Jungian thinking types. The one to the extroverted thinking type. The one to the extroverted thinking type, and the 5 to the introverted thinking type. Or to what to suggest might be better be termed the subjective thinking type. Okay, so introverted, subjective, extroverted objective. Okay, the main difference between them can be discerned from the fact that they are in two different triads. Ones are the instinctive type and fives are the thinking type. While one certainly do think, they're primarily people of action and are only interested in ideas that lead to some practical results. As, however, are truly mental types. They can ponder any proposition or idea and do not particularly care about its practical ramifications. Here, this is, the thing. Like, there are some things that are being repeated time and time again. And, because I do think that I'll be in thinking type, but also, like, in instinctive type, it doesn't really, it kind of like, I can also see that happening, so where exactly do I find myself? Because I've been reading, because I'm reading 5s and 8s, and they both ring true, but there's some things that they ring kind of like false. And I feel like, the types, there's increasingly more things that are false. There are things that, like, I look in the past and I'm like, oh yeah, like, that was very much true, so I totally understand why is that I thought that was me at that point in time. But, like, right now, I am, closer to like something else, I guess. I don't see myself as either of this right now, which is being kind of like the case here. But yeah, but like, because I also, like, it happens. I needed some more specifics in terms of, for example, like, you can live in your own head. Like, yes, but what do they mean by that? Because maybe I'm living in my own head, but not in the way that they're kind of like mentioning here. Maybe it's more living my own head like a type 4 would be, like more intrinsic and, like reflective. Reflective. Contrary to popular notions, opinions and beliefs are their basis in their instincts in the gut. When we assert a position, this is absolutely the way it is. The certainty of our views comes from our gut. We are present enough to notice. If we're present enough to notice, we can feel this when we express a strong opinion. Yes, interesting. I don't disagree. And indeed, what are people of strong convictions and opinions as befitting a type in instinctive or gut triad? Average or unhealthy ones are entirely convinced of the rightness of their views and respect people who hold similar strength in their convictions. They think as a way of buttressing their already established beliefs. Average to unhealthy fives tend to get lost in the maze of uncertainty. Okay, with uncertainty, a good example of something that reminds me of me when I was younger, but like lately, not so much. I'm pretty kind of like confident in things and in myself and what I'm doing, even if like maybe I shouldn't be. I mentioned this before. Sometimes I'm a little too confident in myself. I shouldn't be. I should have a little more questions. About the way I'm doing things. They may develop elaborate theories or positions only to overturn them soon after. While less healthy fives may assert provocative views, they're more interested in disturbing the certainty of others than convincing others that they have the correct view. Okay, I relate to this statement. I relate to this. Correct view. Unhealthy fives may want to feel smarter than the other person and even argue points that they do not personally agree with, just to prove themselves that they can mentally run circles around others. Once again, I relate to this. I think I've been doing better, right now, recently, the past couple of years, but that was kind of like very much part of, and this really mixes with, the eighth of it all, the eightness of it all, so like it's maybe this is kind of like what's happening. And they become less healthy, ones become more rigid and fixed in their views about things. Fives become more uncertain, idealistic, and afraid that they cannot arrive at any kind of meaning of truth. Okay, this one is long. Similarly, they differ most markedly in one's emphasis on certainty and judgment, and fives relative lack of certainty and difficulty with discernment. While healthy ones have excellent judgment, average ones are merely judgmental, still making judgments about the world around them, as is one of the principal ways in which their extroverted thinking manifests itself. Judgment is not essentially important to fives. They want to understand how the world works on a theoretical level and to create inner worlds of imagination that are interesting and amusing to them. See, like, inner worlds are interesting and amusing to them. Like, to this I relate, but like, what exactly constitutes these worlds? Am I in the, because, this reads like a fantasy that you have, are we in fantasy territory? Like, where are we, basically? Thus, fives tend to be detached from the practical world and intensely involved with complex mental constructs. This, very much like 18 to 21-year-old me, and even before, after that, there were some moments. I think recently, But since I turned 25, I've seen a bit of a difference of me being more present in the real world, and in making me just making like an effort to make sure that that is the case. And while healthy fives observe and interact with the real world around them, average fives, as they become more deeply enthralled by their own cerebral landscapes, lose their capacity to make accurate assessments about the true significance and accuracy of their ideas. They gradually care less about an idea's objective rightness than about how their ideas relate to other thoughts that arise in their minds. This really raised like me when I was like, being ridden by trauma. Like that's kind of like what was happening. That was the mental process. By contrast, ones employ thinking so that they can relate more perfectly to their world. Their focus is on making rules and procedures for the progress and improvement of themselves and their world. Average ones are not as detached from the world or as withdrawn as average fives are. Although they may be cool and impersonal and somewhat overly reserved, ones are keenly interested in applying their principles to daily life. Thus, ones and fives are opposites in the way they judge or evaluate reality. Ones judge situations from idealistic standards based on what they think should be the case. Fives are constantly investigating and questioning assumptions, not to mention standards and principles. Ones are deductive, operating from principles to specific applications. Fives are inductive, operating from given data to form more sweeping theories. Both are philosophical and love knowledge. Ones are as a means of perfecting the world, fives as a way of discovering more about the world. Ones tend to be teachers and moralists, not inventors and iconoclasts like fives. The difference between these types can be seen by comparison. George Bernard Shaw, a 1, and Isaac Newton, a 5, Margaret Thatcher, a 1, and Susan Sontag, a 5. The iconoclast part, it is something about the five that I do kind of relate to. Like I see, like there's an appeal there for me. But like, is there a version of that in the type 8, well, yeah, so I didn't really relate to, type 1, but, because some of them, they're basically saying, like, these two, they don't make sense, for you to identify them as very short, and this one, they give you, like, a lot of, like, this is why they're not the same, but, so here's how they're not the same, probably because there's some some apparent similarity by them, although I didn't really see it, to be honest. Okay, so types identifying twos and fives. This is really short. This is an extremely unlikely mistype. Few people of their type would be likely to mistype it themselves as the other type. While others might occasionally be fooled. Surprisingly, it is more likely for some fives to be mistaken for twos, but only in very narrow circumstances. Because fives do not form emotional bonds easily, they can be highly dependent on the few they do form, and can become needy with their significant others. At such times, they do not want their loved ones far from them, so somewhat like average twos. Otherwise, these types are almost opposites. Okay, so literally one example of like them being similar. Twos are emotionally expressive and highly people-oriented. Fives are emotionally detached and can be true loners of the Enneagram. Both feel rejected easily, but twos cope with by winning people over, and fives cope by detaching from the hurt and isolating themselves further. Twos go by their feelings and can get flustered or irritated by overly intellectual approaches or complex ideas and procedures. Fives get flustered or irritated by sentimentality and gushiness. Fives feel that they are more in their element with intellectual concepts and complexity. Twos tend to move toward others. Fives tend to withdraw from others, and so forth. I see myself, particularly like me, unhealthily doing this. The thing of like detaching yourself. But I have already talked about it. I don't think type 2 is one. I think type 2 might have been like the one that I was like it was like the least compatible with, because I feel like nines and ones, although for me they're all in the same sphere, they kind of like have something more for me to, because once they have the thinking thing. And nines, we're about to see what nines have. A detailed comparison and contrast between fives and nines is warranted because so many nines mistakenly think they're fives. Okay, so this is common. Typically, the misidentification almost never happens the other way around. Yeah, I don't think that I would identify with these three types. But I think the truth might be at the bottom. And then, okay, let me read, and then I'll come to a conclusion. Particularly if they are well-educated and intelligent, average male nines tend to think that they are fives. As noted in the discussion of twos, average male nines tend to think that they are twos. Interesting. So the 9 has a little history. Okay, this one is the longest one by, oh my god, Jesus Christ, this is super long. Okay, so no last for later. Let me just show you how long this is. The other one, like the previous one, it was literally one paragraph. Okay, so okay, let's just go. Of all the personality types, nines are the most difficult to identify with which type they are because their sense of self is undefined. Interesting. On the average, nines have a little sense of who they are apart from those they have identified with. Hence, they are usually at loss to know where to begin to find their type. As we have seen, either they think they're fives or twos, or they see little of themselves in all types and make no further effort identifying themselves. Oh, I'm kind of like doing this low-key, not with all the types, but you know, with some of them. If they have a guidance, nines in this predicament usually shrug their shoulders and give up on the Enneagram and more importantly on acquiring self-knowledge. Even relatively healthy nines still have somewhat diffused sense of self because it is based on their capacity to be receptive to others. Okay, this may be less like me than the last one, and to be self-conscious. Moreover, average nines have problems identifying their type because they're doing so aroused anxiety is something completely anathema to them. Whatever disturbs their peace of mind is ignored or met with a blind eye. They avoid introspection and favor entertaining comforting notions about themselves, whatever they may be. Maintain an undefined understanding of themselves and thus maintain their emotional comfort is more important to average nines than acquiring deeper insights. None of this is true of fives, and the two types are opposite in many ways. Nines are gentle, easygoing, patient, receptive, and accommodating, whereas fives are intense and strong-minded, argumentative, contentious, and highly resistant to the influence of others. I do relate to this particular sentence. Nines are like people and trust them. Perhaps at times they are too trusting. By contrast, average fives are suspicious of people and are anything but trusting. Perhaps at times too cynical and resistant. Yeah, I'll say that. Both types are among the three withdrawn types of the Enneagram, and as we have seen with fours and nines, there are genuine similarities between them, although only superficial ones. Despite their similarities, the main point of confusion for nines arises around the notion of thinking. Nines think that they are fives because they think they have profound ideas, therefore they must be fives. Part of the problem stems from the fact that individuals of both types can be highly intelligent, although as a group, fives are probably the more intelligent of the nine personality types. When nines are highly intelligent, they can be as brilliant as fives, although their intellectual prowess is compartmentalized. They are brilliant at work when focused and inattentive everywhere else, whereas fives are focused and attentive everywhere all the time. Yeah, I don't relate to this part, what you're saying, that this is the five. Once again, it could be my ADHD, so kind of hard to come to this, conclusions, although I feel like the nine is getting quickly, taking the lead because I don't know, I feel like, as I said, like I read this and it feels like something of the past. It feels like, okay, I've been there, done that, but it's not so much me anymore. I'm not as withdrawn. I mean, I am introvert, so I need, my lonely moments, to just rebuild my strength, when I interact with people too much. But, it is just like these moments in a day. It's not so much, I mean, when I was younger, it used to be days at a time that I wouldn't interact with anybody. I wouldn't want to interact with anybody. And like, these days it's more like hours at a time. Of course, it depends on the intensity of, the interactions. Like if it's something very intense, I'll need more time. But it's even in this like withdrawn moments, I think that there are exceptions to be made in terms of my, like there are people who they're kind of welcome in the meantime. For example, my mom, like when I'm like withdrawn, and also like it's something about everybody here at home. It's like everybody, I think that everybody here is an introvert. We all have social interactions with people, but from what I gather, it's like we all need a little moment to recharge after interacting and being all there too long. So I think that maybe this kind of like helps because if you're trying to recharge and you can be interrupted constantly, you kind of you're at risk of like you're not really fully charging, so I think because we all need to charge, we all respect each other's boundaries, and as a consequence, I can be brought up and running much more quickly than before. And I think it's because my social interactions, they used to be more exhausting, more like overwhelming, because there was drama. So a lot of things that were happening, they were very much like they were they were taking a lot from me. They were taking a lot away from me. You know, they were just really kind of like digging deep into my soul almost with some of those. And then I was able to work on my traumas. So like things were not as exhausting as they were before. So you know, I needed less to recharge. And I think that, you know, like I still need my withdrawn moments, but I think that it is less. I've been interacting. Of course, like it varies. Like when I get more depressed, I need to be more alone. Otherwise, I get, you know, too exhausted. You know, when I'm already tired. I'm already like very easily tired. So like that is just adding some, you know, wood to the fire. That is, you know, my well-being. Okay, now let me just go back to reading. Although intelligence can be manifested in different ways, being intelligent does not make Nines intellectuals, just as thinking does not make them thinkers. As we have seen, the power as a whole and the motivations must be taken into consideration, not one or two traits in isolation. Since all types think in one way or another, thinking alone with no further distinction is not a sufficient basis for personality diagnosis. The fundamental difference between the thinking of Nines and of Fives is that Nines are impressionistic, involved with generalities, imaginative ruminations, and fanciful situations. This is being kind of rude to Nines a little bit, I'm noticing. Nines typically do not concern themselves with details, nor are they usually good at following up once they have acted. By contrast, the thinking of Fives highly focused, penetrating, and almost microscopic in the narrowness of its frame of reference. Fives love details, losing themselves in research and scholarship and complex intellectual pursuits. They think in depth, concentrating so much that they block out other perceptions, eventually to their detriment. By contrast, even brilliant Nines tend to have problems concentrating. They also tend to lose interest quickly and to allow their attention to drift when they become bored or anxious. Yeah, I do relate to this last sentence, which is kind of sad because I didn't really want to relate to Nines from, you know, the way that we're painting them here. I don't want to be associated. But once again, like this reads like my ADHD. So it's the same thing with like type 7, you know. Yeah. Nines tend to spin grand, sweeping idealistic solutions to problems, while Fives tend to speculate on problems, then on the problems that their problems have raised, then on the problems that are ad infinitum. Nines may be gifted storytellers, which communicate simply and effectively to others, while even to children. Fives usually communicate to only a few, and keep their ideas entirely to themselves. I don't know if this thing of like keeping ideas entirely to themselves is the second or third time that I'm reading about this in this identification things, and I don't know, like on one hand, like I have a lot of examples of that being the case, of me just being in my own head and not really letting anybody in. But I don't know if it's for the reasoning of why I'm doing this. I think this is important, I should take into account. You know, some of it has to do with like these things being very kind of exposing me, making me very vulnerable in a way that I don't want to be, and so I kind of like create this, you know, distance. I don't know if this is why the Five is doing it. But other times, like I have a good example of me sharing things, you know, for my writing. Like I started writing just for myself, but I also publish it, I put it out there. So I'm not just, you know, taking it just with me. It is kind of like for anybody who wants to take a look at it. Moreover, the ideas may be so complicated that they are difficult to communicate to all other specialists. Nines usually do not consider the consequences of their actions. Fives are extremely interested in predicting the consequences of every action. Nines that idealize the world and create imaginary worlds in which good always triumphs over evil. Don't think I've ever done that. Fives analyze the real world and create horrifying scenarios in which evil should triumph over good or exist intention with it. Yeah, I think I relate more to this one. Although to be fair, I'm not feeling like super relatability with either then. You know, I don't think the scenarios I'm creating, they necessarily involve this type of thing. Nines simplify, Fives complexify. Nines look to the past, Fives to the future. Nines are fantasists, Fives are theorists. Nines are disengaged, Fives are detached. Okay, that's interesting. What's the difference between being disengaged and detached? That's kind of cool. Nines are utopians, Fives are nihilists. Nines are optimists, Fives are pessimists. Nines are open, Fives are resistant. Nines are non-threatening and non-judgmental, Fives are defensive and contentious. Nines are at peace, Fives are in tension. Nines are in dissociation, Fives in paranoia. Okay, do I end in dissociation? I don't think, can you be both? Because I think you can dissociate and be paranoid. I know it sounds, yeah, this one sounds kind of contradictory. but I feel like there's like a level of paranoia that I press, that I press it so hard that it gets to a point where I'm like dissociating. There's like different levels of this. Comparisons and contrasts such as this could be multiplied almost indefinitely, because while these two types are such opposites, they are also paradoxically similar. What they have in common is that what they have in common is the tendency to ask what-if questions. The difference is in their response. Nines tend to ruminate on their fantasies, while fives attempt to see if their ideas could come true. The nine's ideas usually involve a single insight that, while true enough, is often impractical and goes nowhere. For instance, a nine may think that the world peace is for everyone to love everyone, while that is doubtlessly true. The problem that addresses how to get everybody to love one another. A five wondering about the same problem would write a treatise on world peace after doing exhaustive historical research, eventually erecting a grand theory of peace. Okay, I don't find myself to be okay. I don't know if I'll go that far. This the five is going, but yeah. But the nine one here, like, it kind of annoys me. Talking about like real life, just reading these, I'm like, okay, situations are coming back and they all annoy me. Okay. The five ideas may also come to nothing, but at least their pursuit and practical results may eventually come of them. Oh, that is interesting, because like I was thinking about that, because like I have ideas and I try to do things, but it doesn't always lead somewhere. Does that make me less of a five? But no. What's important is like the thing that you make, the effort you put into that, and the solution, even if it's not one that actually is comes into play. It's important to just try and make one. To give another example, a nine might wonder what it's like to fly and make up a story about it. A five might wonder how to fly and invent an airplane, or do research on birds, or design a rocket. I find myself to be somewhere between both of these, to be completely honest. In short, nines have an active fantasy life and think that they have deep thoughts. Sometimes they do, of course, although they think of intelligent, well-educated nines to be in the direction of simplifying. Oh, I'm gonna try again. In short, nines have an active fantasy life and think that they have deep thoughts. Sometimes they do, of course, although the thinking of intelligent, well-educated nines tends to be in the direction of simplifying reality and cutting through abstruse tickets to get to the kernel of truth beneath. Nines tend to see things the way they want them to be. They reinterpret reality to make it more comforting and less threatening, simpler and less daunting. By contrast, the thinking of fives is complex. By attempting to arrive at a grand unified theory that encompasses and explains everything, the average fives end up involved in increasing complications and abstractions. Their thoughts is focused on specifics, often highly technical and concerned with foresight and the consequences of acting one way rather than another. But an extreme fives risk seeing reality not as it is, but as a projection of their preoccupations and fears. They distort their perceptions of reality so that reality seems more negative and threatening than it actually is. Now this describes me. I actually think I'm doing better than that, but yeah, that's part of just have like reality becoming even worse than it is. It is a part of my brain, the way that my brain works. Nice that it is in the world, and their style of thinking reflects their unconscious desire to merge with the world. Fives are afraid of being overwhelmed by the world, and their intellectual efforts are unconscious defense against the world and attempt to master it intellectually. There is a world difference between these two types, since they see the world so differently. Compare Charles Darwin, a 5, and Walt Disney, a 9, Albert Einstein, a 5, and Jim Henson, a 9, to understand similarities and differences between these two types more clearly. Interesting comparisons. I think like these were part of like the good ones that they were making. But I'm actually reading this long ass article about Zen 5s and 9s, is that I kind of like I see myself a little bit. There were some things about the 9 that I was like, okay, I kind of like see it, which is not something I wanted, as I mentioned, because they also painted a really bad picture of the 9, so like can't blame me for not wanting to be associated with it. But there were some things, just like with all other types. Yeah, there was at least like one sentence I think in every type that I read that it was kind of that was kind of like pertinent to me one way or another. So that's interesting because that's being human. Like none of us are like a monolith. So of course you're going to identify with different things. But I will say that the more I've been reading about five, the more I'm kind of realizing that maybe the time that I was a five has passed. Like it is, but there was a time where I was very academically inclined, and I was very, I was much more intellectual when I was younger, I guess, than where I am at right now. And it's all these things, they happen, they kind of just happen. Some of them they were more intentional, and I have to take into account like mental illness, because when I'm going to like an episode, I don't perform as normally, as healthily as I usually would, and that is something to take into account. There's something you should take into account for me, something that I should consider. And yeah, so I think the conclusion I've come to with this is that I think I am a type A with a wing in 7. It was good to have read it, because there's still things that like are similar. There's still like I'm relating to a lot of things still, but like I think because the disintegration of 8 is somewhere in 5, something like that. I think it makes sense for me to just see similarities here and there. There is some lessons for me to read. We have addictions, from 5, and I'm gonna be reading them. So, poor eating and sleeping habits due to minimizing needs, neglecting hygiene and nutrition, lack of physical activity, psychotropic drugs for mental stimulation and escape, and narcotics for anxiety. Interesting. I've seen that they don't make sense, but I don't think they necessarily apply, to me. So personal, there's a lot of here. So personal growth and your recommendation for Enneagram Type 5. Learn to notice when you're thinking and speculating takes out of the immediacy of your experience. Your mental capacities can be extraordinary gift, but also can be a trap when you use them to retreat from contact with yourself and from others. Stay connected with your physicality, which is something I've been doing. So you could argue that from the first time I read this to right now, I've been able to successfully improve on this regard. You tend to be extremely intense and so high-strung that you find it difficult to relax and unwind. There's a point in time, but it was very true. Making an effort to learn to calm down in a healthy way without drugs or alcohol, exercising, or using biofeedback techniques will help channel some of your tremendous nervous energy. Meditation, jogging, yoga, dancing, especially helpful for your time. Dancing, I do dancing. And sometimes I meditate. That is very sporadic sometimes. But another thing that I think that I have been able to improve since the first time I read this, you see many possibilities, but often do not know how to choose among them, which is more or less important. Another thing I should struggle with. When you're caught in a fixation, a sense of perspective can be missing, and with the ability to make accurate assessments. At such time, it can be helpful to get advice from someone whose judgment and trust while you are gaining perspective on a situation. Doing this can help you trust someone else, a difficulty for your type. I will say, this is something that I have learned to, I welcome, feedback, more, or other people's opinions. Usually the ones I trust the most are my parents, which, like, it makes sense. I mean, I have great parents. I can trust them. I can rely on them. But yeah, so this is being done, basically. Notice when you're getting intensely involved in projects that do not necessarily support your self-esteem, confidence, and life situation. Another thing I'm doing well with, I've been able to walk away from projects or walk away from things that I usually didn't do. So, check. It is possible to follow many different fascinating subjects, games, and pastimes, but they can become huge distractions from what you really want, what you really need to do. Decisive action will bring more confidence than learning more facts that require more related skills. I will say I have improved in this as well. As I mentioned before, I don't know, not in this video, but some other video, I've been really getting better at like being more decisive. I talked about this before when I was younger. I think deciding the big things, I usually was pretty decisive with my decisions. I knew what to do, but like smaller things that about my daily life were usually kind of like a struggle that I had, to decide. And like that is not the case anymore. Like I come like decisive in all spheres of my life. And I mean sometimes you make the wrong call, but that's a part of life, and I've learned to accept that too, because I think that is one of the reasons why I would sometimes not struggle to decide, is because I was like, what if I make the wrong call? What if I choose wrong? Right? And I've just got to accept that sometimes that is going to happen, and that is life. You just have to live with your choices. And also, like, a lot of things are not that deep. You know, I think I just took things too seriously when I was younger. You know, so like everything was a decision. And like, not everything has to be like a big decision. You know, sometimes it's just choosing ice cream. Like, you know, you just, you know, or gelato, which is where my head's been more lately, more at big lately. No, side by confidence in facts. So, guys tend to find it difficult to trust people, to open up to them emotionally, or to make themselves accessible in various ways. Their awareness of potential problems in relationships may tend to create a self-fulfilling prophecy. It is important to remember that having conflicts with others is not unusual, and that the healthy thing is to work them out rather than reject attachments with people by withdrawing them to isolation. Having one or two intimate friends with whom you can trust, trust enough to have conflicts, who you trust you have conflicts with, who will enrich your life greatly. And once again, I agree with this. So, the first time I read this, I doubt I agree with that. And also, like, I actually put it into practice. I have people who I'm close to, and, you know, it's pretty great. I'm close to, you know, at my own rate. Talk about before, I need a certain distance for me to be comfortable with things. But, you know, everything considered, I'm kind of at a point where I have different relationships, and I'm kind of like juggling all of them in my own way. And I'm allowing myself to, you know, be in touch with people, and for people to be in touch with me. And as I said, there are times and times. Sometimes I'm a little more, you know, skimmish, like I want less contact. But sometimes, you know, I want more, and I reach out. So another thing, another check in my life. So I not wanting to have the whole Enneagram be something that I have to work on, you know, at the risk of be sounding like pretty much what I'm doing. I was like a 5, and then I was